The moment the billionaire stepped into the dim corner of his own restaurant, he expected numbers, silence, and control. What he saw instead stopped his breath mid-step and cracked something deep inside his chest. A young waitress, her uniform slightly worn and her hands trembling from exhaustion, was gently feeding an elderly disabled man with a patience so pure it felt almost sacred. The man's hands shook uncontrollably, his eyes unfocused, his body slumped by years of illness. And the billionaire realized, with a shock that felt like grief, that the broken man before him was his own father. If you believe that kindness still matters in a world that often rewards cruelty, take a moment right now to like this video, comment your thoughts, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to this channel for more stories that remind us what humanity truly looks like. Emily Carter had learned early in life that survival rarely came with comfort. At 26, she worked double shifts at a modest downtown restaurant just to keep her small apartment and afford the medications her younger brother needed. Her days blurred together in a cycle of aching feet, forced smiles, and tips that barely covered bus fare. Yet despite the exhaustion, she carried a quiet strength shaped by loss. She had lost her mother years ago to a long illness, and she remembered too well what it meant to feed someone who could no longer feed themselves. It was not a task, it was an act of love. That afternoon, the restaurant was unusually quiet. Rain pressed against the windows, painting the city in gray streaks. Emily noticed the old man sitting alone at a corner table, his food untouched, his body tense as if the world itself frightened him. Other servers had passed by, unsure, uncomfortable. Management was busy. Emily wasn't told to help him. She simply did. She wiped the table, adjusted his napkin, and slowly began feeding him, spoon by spoon. She waited patiently when his mouth didn't respond. She smiled when food spilled. She cleaned his hands as if they were fragile glass. Time stretched, but Emily didn't rush. She never did when it came to dignity. What Emily didn't know was that the man watching from the shadows was Alexander Whitmore, a billionaire known across the city for ruthless business deals and emotional distance. He owned the restaurant chain, though he rarely visited. That day he had come unannounced, driven by something he couldn't name. And now, frozen in place, he was watching a stranger show more compassion to his father than he had in years. Alexander's relationship with his father had fractured long before money entered the picture. After a stroke left the older man partially paralyzed and cognitively impaired, Alexander had arranged the best care money could buy. Private facilities, doctors, therapists, everything except presence. He had convinced himself that paying for care was the same as caring. Seeing his father now, helpless and confused in a public restaurant he didn't even remember owning, shattered that illusion. Emily finished feeding the man and stayed with him, gently cleaning his face and calming his trembling. She spoke softly, not expecting replies, just offering reassurance. When she finally helped him sip water, her eyes welled with tears she refused to let fall. She thought of her mother, the way her hands had shaken near the end, the way strangers had looked away. Alexander felt something unfamiliar rise in his throat. Guilt, shame, regret. He realized that the waitress didn't know who the man was. She wasn't performing kindness for recognition or reward. She was simply being human. Later that evening, Emily was called into the manager's office. Her stomach tightened. She assumed she had crossed a boundary. Perhaps feeding a customer without permission was against policy. She braced herself for reprimand or termination. Bills flooded her mind. Rent, medication, survival. Instead, she was asked to wait. Minutes later, Alexander entered the room. His presence was commanding, his tailored suit a stark contrast to Emily's worn uniform. She didn't recognize him, only sensed the weight of authority. He looked at her not with judgment, but with eyes heavy from something unspoken. He asked her why she had helped the man. Emily answered simply, explaining that no one should eat alone when they cannot help themselves. That dignity mattered. That sometimes kindness was the only thing people had left. Her words landed like a quiet earthquake. Alexander left without another word. Days passed. Emily returned to work, unsure what to expect. Her life continued its relentless pace. Then, one morning, she received a letter requesting her presence at a private meeting. No explanation. Fear followed hope like a shadow. When she arrived, she found Alexander waiting, along with medical professionals and legal representatives. He explained that the man she had helped was his father. He admitted that despite his wealth, he had failed him emotionally. He confessed that watching her had reminded him of something he had lost long ago. Then he did something no one expected. He offered Emily a position not as an employee, but as a partner in a foundation he intended to build, a foundation dedicated to caring for disabled and elderly individuals with compassion, not just efficiency. He wanted her to help shape it, guide it, teach others what real care looked like. Emily was overwhelmed. She tried to refuse, believing she wasn't qualified. Alexander insisted that compassion was the only qualification that mattered. Her life began to change in ways she never imagined. Her brother received full medical coverage. Emily received training, resources, and a voice. But the most powerful change was not financial. It was purpose. Alexander began visiting his father daily. He fed him. He listened to silence. He learned patience. Emily often joined them, quietly guiding him without judgment. Slowly, the old man responded, not in words, but in calmness, in trust. The foundation grew, touching countless lives. Caregivers were trained not just in technique but in empathy. Facilities became warmer, more human. Stories spread. Emily never sought attention. She continued to believe that what she did was ordinary. But the world began to see that ordinary kindness could change extraordinary lives. Near the end of the year, at a small gathering honoring caregivers, Emily stood in the back, uncomfortable with praise. Alexander spoke publicly for the first time not about success, but about failure, about how he had mistaken wealth for worth, about how a waitress had shown him the true meaning of care. As the room filled with applause, Emily felt tears finally fall, not from pride, but from release, from knowing that pain could transform into something meaningful. Just before the night ended, Alexander's father was brought in, supported but calm. He reached out, his hand shaky, and held Emily's. In that moment, she felt something close to peace. If this story touched your heart even a little, please take a moment right now to like the video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe to this channel. Your support helps keep these stories alive. And before the video ends, we have a special request for you. Please comment below and tell us what kindness means to you, or share a moment when compassion changed your life. Because sometimes the smallest acts done quietly can rebuild families, heal regrets, and remind the world that humanity still exists.